for taking off time from your very tight schedule to talk to the Post newspaper.
I thank you and the Post, your very popular newspaper, for the privilege of this interview, Mr. Yerima Kininsom. I am pleased to share with your readers my view on matters concerning our country.
You are one of the frontline federalists in the ongoing Anglophone crisis that has been rocking this country now for the past 6 years. Some observers hold that you are going back to your vomit by virtue of your stance, given that you belong to the Elad Munzu Anyangwe triple fraternity that declared the zero option. That is the struggle for Southern Cameroons' independence when the Biya regime didn't heed your call for a return to federation. What is your reaction to this accusation?
Am I going back to my vomit, as you put it? No, I am not. I'm a federalist, always have been a federalist, and remain a federalist. This should be clearly understood. You say that the Biya regime didn't heed our call for a return to federation. Does this make federalism or federation a bad option that we should not pursue? The Biya regime may not like federation or federalism for its own selfish interests. Under a federal system, a significant degree of power will be removed from its hands. This regime prefers to monopolize power under a so-called decentralized unitary state, where Yaoundé will continue to control everything in all regions through unelected governors, senior divisional officers, and divisional officers. Should that make us turn away from federalism? My answer is no. Note that the Biya regime has refused to heed the call to comply with Article 66 of our country's constitution that requires the President of the Republic and other clearly designated state officials to declare their assets when they take and leave office. Does this mean that in the fight against corruption, the obligation to declare assets under Article 66 of the Constitution is not good for our country, or that we should turn away from Article 66 of the Constitution? For decades, the Biya regime has refused to heed the call to establish a truly independent electoral commission. Does this mean that we should turn away from our demand for an independent electoral commission as a necessary institution for democracy in our country? The Biya regime has refused to heed the people's demand for a truly impartial and independent judiciary. Should we stop demanding an impartial and independent judiciary as the foundation of a good justice system in our country? We could cite many examples. Here is the thing, Yerima. The merits and benefits of federalism as a system of government for Cameroon do not depend upon its acceptance by the Biya regime. Cameroonians should not worry whether the Biya regime pays heed to the call for a return to federation or not. They should rather ask whether federalism can enable us to address the governance challenges facing our country today. If the people want a federal system of government, they will, in the long run, get a federal system of government. For my part, I believe very strongly that federalism is best for the peaceful governance of Cameroon, a country that is so complex and so diverse, but which, despite its complexity and diversity, must remain united.
There has been pent-up anger against your position. You have had avalanche of criticisms from left, right, and center, especially from the separatists.
Mr. Kininsom, When you have to address a matter as serious, complex, and important as the Anglophone problem in Cameroon, don't approach it with anger, violence, and lies. Otherwise, you are not likely to find a suitable solution. Unfortunately, most of the people whom you say have pent-up anger against me, especially among the separatists, are driven by just that: anger, violence, lies. I am not infallible. My position could be a wrong one. In that case, those who criticize me from, as you put it, left, right, and center should show where I am wrong. None of what these people say against me consists of cogent arguments against the views that I express based on historical facts, our contemporary realities, and relevant provisions of domestic and international law. Let me repeat, I'm not infallible. But honestly, I have no time for people who, instead of confronting my arguments with counter-arguments, resort to anger, violence, lies, insult, verbal and physical threats, bullying, and denigration on social media.
Why do you think that federation is the best way out of the Anglophone crisis?
Yarima, federation is clearly the best way out of this crisis. Ask yourself these three questions about Cameroon. How did this country come about? How is it composed? What or how has it evolved since its origin? The Cameroon that you and I live in today owes its origin directly to the choice made by the overwhelming majority of Southern Cameroonians voting at the United Nations organized plebiscite of 11th February 1961 for their territory to achieve independence by joining the independent Republic of Cameroon rather than the independent Federation of Nigeria, creating a new country, the Federal Republic of Cameroon, with effect from the 1st of October 1961. No Cameroonian of good faith and sound mind can deny this simple historical fact. However, prior to coming together, the two territories of the British Southern Cameroons and the Republic of Cameroon explicitly agreed that the new country they were about to form should be a federation comprising two federated states of equal status. Each was to conduct its affairs according to the system of government bequeathed to it by its colonial experience. That, too, is a simple historical fact that no Cameroonian of good faith and sound mind can deny. This fundamental agreement was broken when the country switched from a federation to a unitary state in 1972. Since then, one side has sought to assimilate the other, while the other has steadfastly resisted assimilation. That is the root cause of the ongoing crisis in the Northwest and Southwest regions. It is the third simple historical fact that no Cameroonian of good faith and sound mind can deny. In the subsequent evolution of the country, Cameroonians of all regions have come to cherish and to aspire to genuine, autonomy for their region. They want each region to run its affairs. This is another fact that no Cameroonian of good faith and sound mind can deny. In light of these facts, the government's offer of a decentralized unitary state with the so-called special status for the two English-speaking regions is a recipe for continuing the domination, marginalization, assimilation, and subjugation of Anglophone Cameroonians. On the other hand, separation as advocated by the armed groups that are fighting against the government is a recipe for breaking up the Cameroon that was constituted through unification in 1961. How can we avoid the breakup of Cameroon while also ending the domination, marginalization, assimilation, and subjugation of Anglophone Cameroonians? It is by re-establishing the federation. A new federation would grant full autonomy to each region, devolve adequate powers to it, and provide it the revenue that it needs to conduct its affairs and deliver services to its inhabitants. It will keep Cameroon united and prevent its breakup into two or more separate independent states. It would end the domination, marginalization, assimilation, subjugation, and second-class citizen status of Anglophone Cameroonians in this country. It would respond to the aspiration of Cameroonians of all regions for the autonomy of their region. You can see, Mr. Kininsom, that keeping sentiment, lies, and greed aside, federation is, without doubt, the best option for this strife-torn country.
Despite your advocacy for a return to federation, especially the pre-1972 federal status of the country, the Yaoundé regime has maintained that it would not entertain any discussions on a possible change in the form of state. What do you intend to do in order to talk them out of this conservative and adamant position? What do you intend to do to turn things around?
Yarema, my friend, my advocacy for a return to federation is not aimed primarily at the Yaoundé regime. It is aimed first and foremost at the Cameroonian people in all regions. History teaches us that all over the world, those who are in power prefer the status quo after spending years, in some cases decades, as in Cameroon, putting in place regimes that serve their interest, often to the detriment of the population for whom they care very little. Consequently, they tend to resist all calls for change for fear of losing power and their grip on society. People's power alone can lead them to implement necessary reforms. The advantages of the new federal system that we advocate are so obvious and overwhelming that the government, whether under this regime or a future one, ought to agree willingly to re-establish federalism in Cameroon. If it doesn't, the population of the 10 regions will constrain it towards acceptance through various acts of peaceful but effective resistance. There are ways of organizing this type of resistance. If necessary, Cameroonians will apply them. I am convinced that the prospect of organized civil resistance in all regions of Cameroon will compel the Yaoundé regime to abandon its obstinate and unreasonable rejection of calls to change the form of the state in the general interest of our nation. I believe that there is, in the majority of Cameroonians, latent support for the re-establishment of federalism in the new form that we advocate.
Soldiers have been accused of extrajudicial killings and the burning of houses in what looks like a collective punishment against Anglophones in this country in the northwest and southwest regions. What legal name do you give these crimes?
Extrajudicial killing is homicide, which is the act of unlawfully killing another human being. In our domestic criminal law, a person who unlawfully kills another can be prosecuted and punished for manslaughter, murder, or aggravated murder. Also, in our law, the burning of houses is punishable as arson. So, soldiers who commit the acts you've mentioned could be prosecuted before Cameroonian criminal courts for manslaughter, murder, aggravated murder, or arson. When committed against whole communities, such as the Anglophones in the northwest and southwest regions of this country, extrajudicial killings, the burning of homes, and similar atrocities could, depending on the facts and the circumstances, constitute crimes against humanity and war crimes. Since 1998, the perpetrators of such acts are liable to prosecution for crimes against humanity in accordance with the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court that sits permanently at The Hague in the Netherlands. In the context of the ongoing crisis in the southwest and northwest regions of Cameroon, these atrocities are taking place within the framework of a non-international armed conflict. As such, they constitute war crimes which are punishable by Article 3 common to the 1949 Geneva Conventions. In application of this article, persons who commit these acts could be prosecuted and punished before the International Criminal Court.
How would you qualify the exactions of some separatist fighters against the civilians they claim to protect?
Separatist fighters who commit exactions against civilians are punishable in the same manner as government forces under both domestic and international criminal law. These exactions could constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity, as discussed in my answer to your last question. Therefore, separatist fighters committing such acts should know that they expose themselves to prosecution and punishment before Cameroonian criminal courts for offenses against the Cameroonian Penal Code and before the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity and war crimes in the same manner and to the same extent as government forces.
Dr. Simon Munzu, you seem to totally disagree with those who say that government forces are committing genocide in Amazonia. What is your grasp with this claim?
What you mean is those who say that government forces are committing genocide in the former Southern Cameroons or in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. There is no place called Amazonia. Yerima, let's be clear. The crime of genocide is not defined by public opinion. It is not defined, it is defined by international criminal law. When you are a lawyer, as I am, you don't accept that genocide exists just because lay popular opinion claims that it exists. You accept the existence of genocide when the situation presents all the ingredients of the crime of genocide as defined by international criminal law. The general public tends to consider any killing of many people as genocide. However, your readers should know that genocide is a peculiar international crime that is defined in very specific terms by a particular international legal instrument commonly called the Genocide Convention. Under this convention, the crime of genocide requires not only that certain physical acts are committed against the victims, but also that they are committed with a specific intent. The specific intent must be to destroy a targeted group partly or totally. In the case of the Anglophones in Cameroon, for there to be genocide, it has to be proved that any acts that are alleged to have been committed were inflicted upon any number of Anglophones with the specific intent of partially or totally destroying Anglophone Cameroonians as a group. This is a legal requirement. It does not depend on my opinion or your opinion or the opinion of any other person or group. The question as to whether genocide has been or is being committed in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon was hotly debated on social media last week. I participated in that debate, expressing the view that it would be difficult, not impossible, I didn't say it was impossible, but that it would be difficult to prove before a court of law that the Yaoundé regime intended specifically to destroy Anglophone Cameroonians as a group, partially or totally, as required by the definition of genocide in international criminal law. This is because Anglophones who have been living for decades in the 8 Francophone regions of Cameroon have so far not been targeted as a group since the current crisis began in 2016. At the same time, Anglophones fleeing the armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions have sought refuge in the 8 Francophone regions that have welcomed them. These are verifiable facts. My point was that on these facts, those who claim that genocide is going on in Cameroon would find it difficult to prove specific intent to destroy Anglophone Cameroonians as a group. That is all I said. My opponents in the social media debate argued that the intent to destroy Anglophones as a group could be inferred from the atrocity acts that have been committed against some of them. Fair enough. This meant that, as commonly happens on questions of law among lawyers, two opposing viewpoints exist on this legal issue. A day will probably come when a court in Cameroon or at the international level will rule that one of these viewpoints is right while the other is wrong. While we are still waiting for that day, my opponents, including a lawyer who practices before the International Criminal Court and might therefore be expected to understand the crucial legal point that I was making, were quick to accuse me of being a genocide denier and an apologist for genocide, which they claim is taking place in the southwest and northwest regions. This is insane, but not surprising. The separatists do that all the time. Whenever they are unable to come up with a factual or legal argument to counter any of my contentions, they resort to personal attack. It's shameful and regrettable. When I take the government to task for the atrocities being committed in the southwest and northwest regions by its forces, the Yaoundé regime labels me as an apologist of secession, thus lumping me with separatists. When I challenge separatists to prove the existence of a major ingredient required by international criminal law to establish the crime of genocide, they label me as an apologist for genocide and lump me with the Yaoundé regime. That is how intolerant the Yaoundé regime and separatists have become. Since November 2017, mass atrocities have been committed against civilians by both sides to the armed conflict that is going on in the southwest and northwest regions of Cameroon. People have been arbitrarily executed or otherwise deprived of their lives. Villages, homes, hospitals, schools, churches, administrative buildings, and other non-military or civilian infrastructure and facilities have been burnt down, destroyed, vandalized, or looted. Women and girls have been raped. People's livelihoods have been destroyed and their economic activities have been interrupted. Children have been deprived of school and education. The list goes on. None of us can deny that these atrocities have been committed and continue to be committed by both sides against civilians in the former Southern Cameroons. In any case, I, Simon Munzu, do not deny this. in all my advocacy for a peaceful resolution of this conflict since it began, my most strident call has been for these atrocities to stop and for perpetrators to be held to account before national and international criminal courts as appropriate, irrespective of whether they are government forces or separatist fighters. That's because most, if not all, of these atrocities constitute war crimes or crimes against humanity, as I previously explained in this interview. So, even if these atrocities do not amount to genocide, that doesn't mean that their perpetrators will go unpunished. They are liable to be tried and punished for war crimes and crimes against humanity, as I strongly advocate. Is this denial of genocide? Is this apology for genocide? Certainly not. On such a technical subject as the crime of genocide, legal experts have a responsibility to educate and guide public opinion, not to mislead it in the name of politics.
What are the issues that put you asunder with separatists and their independence agenda? Do you pick holes? What are the areas of the arguments that you pick holes, especially legal arguments? Where do you disagree with them in their advocacy, in their struggle for the independence of Ambazonia?
Once again, Yerima, please let me point out that there is nothing as Ambazonia. If you must talk of the struggle for independence, talk of the independence of the former Southern Cameroons or of the former West Cameroon or of today's southwest and northwest regions of Cameroon. Ambazonia is a fiction that exists only in the mind of some delusional individuals in Cameroon and abroad. Turning to your question, there is common agreement among us Anglophone Cameroonians, including those who strongly support the Yaoundé regime, that we are marginalized, dominated, assimilated, and subjugated in this country. There is common agreement among us that since 1961, the Ahijo and Biya regimes have sought to destroy the specific heritage and identity that the Southern Cameroons brought into its union with the Republic of Cameroon on the 1st of October 1961, and to reduce Anglophone Cameroonians to the status of second-class citizens. There is common agreement among us that we have to take action to address this situation, put an end to our domination, marginalization, assimilation, subjugation, and second-class status, and revive and safeguard our distinct identity and heritage as the English-speaking former Southern Cameroons. These points constitute the substance of the Anglophone problem and the root cause of the ongoing crisis in the northwest and southwest regions. On them, I believe that there is no difference or disagreement between me and separatists. Our differences or disagreement relate to what needs to be done to address the situation. The separatist solution is for us to break away from the union that was formed on 1st October 1961 and establish a separate and independent country. My solution is federalist in nature. It entails accepting that we cannot rewind the clock to 1959 or 1960. We have to accept the reality that the Southern Cameroons and the Republic of Cameroon unified in 1961 under the auspices of the United Nations. That union is binding on all parties. The Yaoundé regime must be held to the specific agreement entered into by the parties in 1961 to establish a federal union in which each territory conducts its affairs in accordance with its own identity, heritage, and institutions. This federalist approach is non-violent. It's predicated on the force of argument rather than the argument of force. By contrast, separatists deny that unification of our two territories took place in 1961. They deny that the United Nations completed the process of decolonizing the Southern Cameroons in 1961. They deny that key international legal instruments such as the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1608 of 21st April 1961 were properly applied. They have chosen the path of confrontation not only with the Yaoundé regime, but also with the United Nations, the African Union, the European Union, the Commonwealth, and the International Organization of the Francophonie. Separatists deliberately distort historical facts and misstate the content and significance of international legal instruments, including the United Nations Charter, resolutions of the United Nations General Assembly, and communications of the African Court of Human and People's Rights, or its predecessor, the Commission. They prefer the argument of force over the force of argument and use violence not only against those whom they claim to be the enemy, but also and even more against their own civilian population. Separatists have set the legitimate cause of Anglophone Cameroonians back considerably, not only in the psyche of our people themselves, but in the eyes of the international community. We are now faced with the challenge of redressing the damage that they have done and are continuing to do.
Some people believe that your past leadership of the student wing of the CNU in the United Kingdom and the executive position you held in the CBDM for almost a decade is haunting you. I raise this issue because it is alleged that you still have the ruling party hangover and may be secretly doing Biya's bidding within the Southern Cameroonian space. How would you react to this?
Yerima, for people in Cameroon and abroad who know me and who know the history of my personal engagement and activism for the Anglophone cause in this country, over the past 30 years. Such an allegation is so absurd that it does not deserve any response. But let me say this. For a period of 24 years, that is from 1966 to 1990, Cameroon was a one-party state. On the 1st of September 1966, when the Cameroon National Union was instituted as the only political party in Cameroon, I was just a kid. I had just completed Form 3 at St. Joseph's College, Sase, in Biya. I have been interested in politics since my early years. I joined the youth wing of the CNU in the Tuba section, in fact the Tuba subsection, in 1969, while I was a student at CAST Bambule. After CAST, I traveled to London in 1971 and became a member of the United Kingdom section of the CNU. In this section, there was no women's wing, no youth wing, and no student wing. All militants belonged together. So, for a start, I never assumed, to quote you, leadership of the student wing of the defunct CNU in the United Kingdom, as you suggest in your question. However, I occupied posts in the executives of the CNU in England at the section and subsection levels until my return to Cameroon in January 1982 to teach law at the University of Yaoundé. Cameroon at that time was still a one-party state. Early in 1983, President Amadou Ahidjo, who remained the national chairman of the CNU after he resigned from the office of President of the Republic, appointed me as one of 3 chargés de mission to assist him at the Central Committee of the party. In 1985, the CNU became the CPDM, and President Biya replaced President Ahidjo as the national chairman of the party. But we were still under a one-party regime. I was retained as chargé de mission at the Central Committee of the CPDM. In 1990, President Biya reorganized the Central Committee of the CPDM, appointing me as the party's National Secretary for Economic and Social Affairs. Mr. Kininsom, take note that it's in this capacity and as a member of the CPDM delegation that I attended the tripartite conference of November 1992. I did not attend that conference as a representative of Anglophone Cameroonians. It was also as a representative of the CPDM, not of Anglophone Cameroonians, that I was chosen by the tripartite conference to be one of the 11 members of the technical committee that was established to draft a new constitution for Cameroon. On the floor of the tripartite conference, as well as during deliberations of the technical committee, I spoke forcefully on the Anglophone problem and the need to return to the federal system of government as the only way to end the domination, marginalization, assimilation, and subjugation of Anglophone Cameroonians in this country. I clearly placed the interests of Anglophone Cameroonians over allegiance to the CPDM, the ruling party in which I held the high-profile position of National Secretary for Economic and Social Affairs of the Central Committee. Such a show of courage on a matter of principle was remarkable, and at that time, it surprised many Cameroonians. All the more because I was a civil servant teaching law at the University of Yaoundé, which was administered by the CPDM government and its agents. I still occupied this position when, with Barrister Sam Ekontang Elad and Dr. Carlson Anyangwe, we convened the first All-Anglophone Conference in 1993 and the second in 1994. When Barrister Elad, Dr. Anyangwe, and I submitted to the Constitutional Drafting Committee the document entitled Draft Constitution of the Federal Republic of Cameroon, that this committee, chaired by Professor Joseph Owona, chose to ignore. And I still held that position when the three of us decided in protest to walk out of the Constitutional Review Commission that President Biya had set up to review the report and recommendations submitted by the technical committee at the end of its work. Yerima, it is because the CPDM, as the ruling party, refused to give the appropriate attention to the Anglophone problem that I took the initiative to resign in 1994 from the party, and in 1995 from the civil service and the University of Yaoundé too, and ended up leaving Cameroon to serve the United Nations, starting at the humble position of a United Nations volunteer. Since then, I've had absolutely nothing to do with the CPDM. That hasn't stopped separatists who seem to have an aversion for facts and truth from waging an intense and malicious campaign of misinformation and disinformation against me. Please note that, as far as I am concerned, in the political arena of this country, I do not consider myself as anyone's enemy or anyone as my enemy. I am a democratic governance advocate and activist with a special interest in addressing the Anglophone problem and ending the domination, marginalization, assimilation, and subjugation of Anglophone Cameroonians in this country. I do not believe that in Cameroon all the angels are on one side and all the devils are on the other side. I therefore tried to maintain a healthy relationship with political actors across the spectrum. those in the opposition, as well as those in government. They include, of course, members of the CPDM. And you'll be surprised to learn I maintain a healthy personal relationship with several separatist leaders in the diaspora. Otherwise, I repeat, I have had absolutely nothing to do with the CPDM ever since I voluntarily resigned from this ruling party in 1994 over the Anglophone problem. It's silly for anyone who cares about the truth to allege that I, in your words, still have the ruling party hangover and may be secretly doing Biya's bidding within the Southern Cameroonian space. What is that? On the public affairs of Cameroon, there's nothing that I do or say in secret. All my actions, utterances, and encounters take place in the open, whether in Cameroon or abroad. They can be verified by anyone.
Dr. Simon Munzu, a legal mind, we know you were privileged to serve the United Nations for over 2 decades, and you served this world body after you had put in place the Zero Option program. Did you by any means take advantage of your vantage office to make at least part of your case? That is a return to federation that you unrepentantly advocate at this moment?
Yarema, thank you for that question. I was privileged indeed to serve the United Nations in various capacities and at several levels for over 2 decades, from 1995 to 2016. When you serve with the United Nations as a career staff member, especially at senior levels, you sign an undertaking not to get involved in the internal affairs of any member state of the organization, including your home country. During my 21 years as a UN employee, I adhered strictly to this obligation imposed by the organization's Code of Ethics. In that time, I did not involve myself in any way in the public affairs of Cameroon. By coincidence, the ongoing crisis in the northwest and southwest regions began in October 2016, a week after I arrived in Cameroon to begin life as a UN retiree who was no longer bound by the UN Code of Ethics. Therefore, right from the beginning of the crisis, I was free and able to throw myself into the search for a negotiated solution that would preserve the unity of Cameroon while also freeing Anglophone Cameroonians from the shackles of domination, marginalization, assimilation, subjugation, and second-class citizenship. The end point of such a solution, I believe, is a federal system of government. With other Cameroonians who share the same vision, we are pushing for this agenda at home and abroad, including at the United Nations and at the capitals of prominent nations in Africa, Europe, North America, and Asia. Unfortunately, our task is rendered difficult by the absence of a united front among Anglophones and the irresponsible attitude and actions of separatists in and out of Cameroon. The separatist narrative that relies on the distortion of history, facts, and law is a major hindrance. Nevertheless, we are making significant strides forward, and sooner or later, the results of our concerted efforts will begin to show.
Thank you very much, Dr. Munzu. I know that we have not gone the whole gamut of addressing all the issues that surround your federalism advocacy. Is there anything that you would like to talk about that we have not raised in the questions that I have put to
you? Not really, Yarima. I believe that we have covered a lot of ground in this interview. However, since you offer me the opportunity, if I may add a word, it would be to the attention of Anglophone Cameroonians at home and abroad. I would like them to remember that following a campaign that was vigorously led by their political leaders of the day through Dr. EML Ndeli and his party, the CPNC, on the one hand, and Mr. J.N. Foncha and his party, the KNDP, on the other, the overwhelming majority of the voters in the Southern Cameroons chose at the plebiscite of 11th February 1961 for their territory to achieve independence by joining the previously French-administered Republic of Cameroon. They should remember that our forebears had a choice in that plebiscite to vote in favor of joining the independent Federation of Nigeria, and they could have done so. But they freely chose the Republic of Cameroon. That choice was binding. No one should try to fool us today that it was not. However, we recall also that the Southern Cameroons and the Republic of Cameroon came together on the express agreement consigned in the Constitution of 1st October 1961 that they were forming a new country, the Federal Republic of Cameroon, made up of two federated states of equal status. In 1972, that agreement was broken. The government, the House of Assembly, the House of Chiefs, the judiciary, and all the institutions of the former Southern Cameroons were abolished. Since then, as all Anglophone Cameroonians, even children, can see and feel today, whether they live in Cameroon or abroad, Anglophones have been reduced to the rank of second-class citizens in this country, where they are, as I repeatedly say, dominated, marginalized, assimilated, and subjugated, even in their regions of origin. The question today, as we move into 2023, is whether Anglophone Cameroonians want to continue to be dominated, marginalized, assimilated, and subjugated second-class citizens in a decentralized unitary state. If they answer no to this question, then they have to get together and fight for the return to a federal system of government in which their regions enjoy autonomy and are able to conduct their affairs in accordance with their own identity, heritage, and institutions. I therefore invite them, without exception, to join the effort to re-establish federalism in Cameroon in 2023.
Is there any specific message, maybe to any quarters, maybe to the separatists that you are trying to convince with your federalism agenda, and maybe to the authorities of this country, to the belligerents, all of them, for, you are advocating a return to peace and through federalism. So please, is there a specific message for those people?
Oh, sure. Again, with your permission, Yerima, I would like to address a short message to the belligerents, that is to say, the separatists and the government. To both of them, I say, listen to the cry of the inhabitants of the northwest and southwest regions. Put an end to this war and the suffering that it is inflicting on the people of these two regions. Declare a ceasefire. Enter into meaningful negotiations, facilitated or mediated by the international community, to end the war. After that, let's have a national conference on the re-establishment of federalism in Cameroon. To the separatists specifically, my message is, you have made your point, but know that Cameroon, as the country that was established on the 1st of October 1961, cannot be broken up. You will not obtain independence by war, nor will you obtain it by negotiation. So let go of the illusion of independence. Adopt federalism as your plan B. Join the effort to re-establish federalism. To the government specifically, my message is, you have tried for over 60 years to assimilate and subjugate Anglophone Cameroonians. You have failed because no generation of Anglophones would accept to be assimilated and subjugated. So abandon your unachievable assimilationist agenda. Adopt federalism as your plan B for keeping Cameroon united. Join the effort to re-establish the federal system of government in Cameroon. If you do this, peace will quickly return to the southwest and northwest regions. Life will quickly return to normal for the inhabitants of these regions and to Cameroon as a whole, so that the people of this country can turn their attention completely to overcoming the enormous development challenges that we face. With that, Yarima, I wish to thank you once more, as well as the management of the Post newspaper, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with your readers in particular, but my Cameroonian compatriots in general, whether living at home or abroad. Thank you very much. God bless you.